Hello everyone and welcome back to the continuation of my Xplane 11 series flying from Bavaria to New Zealand. This will be episode 45 and it's been almost a year now since I recorded the last episode. In the meantime, this channel has, I think, nearly doubled in size in terms of subscribers. So there will be a lot of people who probably have no idea that I've been doing this and who are perhaps used to slightly more exciting videos. These tend to be quite pedestrian. So sit back and enjoy, if that's your thing. We're going to be flying today from Jubail to Bahrain, I think. I'm just checking my flight plan. Yeah, Bahrain International, which is OBBI. It's about 80 nautical miles, this flight, so pretty standard range for these videos for me. We are going to be continuing to read Johnnie Johnson's Wing Leader. Once I'm airborne, we'll pick up in the middle of chapter 4, which we were reading in the last episode. And finally, a couple of people have asked if I'll be switching over to Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. Probably. I'll get as far as I can in Xplane until MSFS 2020 comes out, and then we'll continue probably in that, assuming it's going to be good. So let's jump in the aeroplane then. And we have to pretty much get started from cold here. I've been through my controls. The last time I flew, I had my old PC. So I've actually got a completely new PC, which is one of the reasons I've delayed so long getting cracking with this. But let's just check cockpit security, which I know is fine. And we'll turn the park brake on. Then we will check the circuit breakers are all in, which they are. Magnetos are off. Fuel pump is off. Throttle is 0. Mixture is lean. We can turn the beacon on. We'll turn the nav lights and the battery on. Avionics and the radio will go on in order for us to submit our flight plan, which I'm going to do right away. Whoopsie, wrong. These icons are all so close together. So flight plan will be us in the Cessna 172 Skyhawk from OEJB, from OE Juliet Bravo 2, Oscar Bravo Bravo India. We'll go at 4,000 feet, so not too high. And let's request the altimeter while we're here.
Skyhawk 2 Sierra Papa King Abdulaziz altimeter
2941. 2941.
King Abdulaziz altimeter 2941. Skyhawk 2 Sierra Papa.
Okay, there's 2941. Now I'm going to start the engine up in just a second. GPS, we've done the flight plan. Fuel both, and we've got the quantity for fuel. Yeah, I added some more fuel in, so that's all good. Flaps are up. Now we'll turn the radios off because we've submitted the flight plan. And the alternator is off. Brakes, just to reconfirm, we've got the battery on, so we can now lean the mixture, 1/4 throttle, and then we're just going to go rich until we've got flow. Going to use the pump for this. There we go. That's good enough. Good, and then we lean it, fuel pumps off, ready to start. Historically, I've had awful trouble getting this thing started, but we'll see how it goes. Okay, a bit of a rough start there, and a bit of over throttling, so not the greatest of starts, but I don't think I've damaged anything. So we're all good for the moment. Now the alternator can come on. We'll turn the radios back on. Set the altimeter, which we've done. Heading indicator will be set, so let's just check. We are 160 currently. Let's just rotate this one around into 160. My heading for the flight is 120, which I've already dialed in, so that's all tickety-boo there. Transponder, I will check in a minute. Let's request clearance. 4700, good.
Bahrain International has filed. Maintain 4000. Squawk 4700.
Good. Okay.
Firdaia FR2, Bahrain International, as filed, maintain 4000, walk 4700, Skyhawk 2, Sierra Papa.
Now we'll request taxi because we're pretty much ready to go. Just do a quick mag check while we're here. Checking brakes, set for 1800. Okay, look for the dip then. Yep, good. Back up. Back up. Good. Okay, let's request taxi. I'll set for 1000 RPM again. And
Skyhawk 2, Sierra, Papa, runway 35, hold short of runway 35.
oh, runway 35. Great. I've got a taxi all the way to the other end of the airfield.
Short of runway 35, Skyhawk 2, Sierra Papa.
Okay, we're going to taxi. Shut the little radio interface down. And I do have this little taxi departure wizard thing going. That's just because I haven't flown Xplane for such a long time. And I'm just going to use that for the first kind of get back into it flight. It's the big yellow triangles or arrows you can see on the taxiway here. This is a pretty simple airfield. It's just a single taxiway and a runway, so it's not actually that complicated. So I'm pretty interested in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. I won't say I'm excited because I have no idea what it's going to be like. A lot of the stuff online looks quite pretty, and it's probably going to be a massive FPS hog if that's really what it looks like. I doubt there will be any kind of damage modeling, so that also means no combat related functionality. Not that the civilian flight sims have ever really been any good for combat. That's a different world, really. Combat flight simulation and civil flight simulation, they're quite separate. This actually looks like mostly a crosswind. Okay, a little bit of brakes here, just as we go around this bend. Okay, I'm going to come to a halt.
Skyhawk 2, Sierra, Papa, contact tower on 120.50.
Okay, contact tower, so let's do a readback.
Contact tower on 120.50, Skyhawk 2, Sierra Papa.
12050. Good, now we're checking with the...
Skyhawk 2, Sierra Papa.
Skyhawk 2, Sierra, Papa, fly heading 340, runway 35. You're cleared for takeoff.
Cool, we're clear for takeoff on 35, and our instruction is to fly 340.
35,
So let's taxi out. I'm checking visually the sky. I can't really see anything because of this idiotic overhead wing. If there's someone on finals, sorry, I can't see you. I'm just going to trust the controllers here that they've got this right. And we're going to roll straight on out. No messing about here. Straight on and go. So throttling forward. Try and line the aeroplane up, sort of. Rudder is starting to become quite effective now, throwing the nose around. That's a good lift-off speed. We are airborne. Little bit out of trim, just pushing the left rudder slowly back into the center. Okay, trimmed out on the... Actually, not bad trim on the nose as well, maintaining this little climb with the top of the dash on the horizon. I think I'll stick with that. Engine power looks good. T's and P's look good. Okay, contact ZGD center. 13595. Okay, I'm going to check in with the controller, the area controller.
Skyhawk 2 Sierra Papa.
Are we on 340? Yep. 2941, which is still the setting we're using. I've got to read back this transmission as well. Come on, mate. Give me a chance. Okay, I should get a resume my navigation shortly because I'm actually heading away from where I want to be heading, which is 120. We're actually climbing north at the minute. I'm going to get rid of that radio box as soon as I can. Okay, here we go. Fly heading 070. Alright, turning right onto 070. Now we're getting fly 120. So around we go. You can see the landscape around here is pretty ugly. Xplane 11 is already starting to show its age. And now we're on resume own navigation. It's when flying these, I'm not really coordinated here, it's when flying these long round the world trips you realise how much of these sims they actually just have provided very limited to no detail for. Despite it being a world map, there's just massive areas where they've just done nothing in order to save on data and performance and all that. Obviously places like the UK and Innsbruck and most of the US are really heavily detailed because that's where everyone flies, but as soon as you start flying out of the areas where people like to go, it's just, I mean, really blocky terrain. You really notice all that stuff. Coming up on 3,000 feet, so 1,000 more to go, then we level off. And then we start reading. Johnnie Johnson. Nicely trimmed out. I think I can take my feet off the rudders now. Yes, I can. Oh, no, I need a little bit of right trim. A little bit of right rudder trim. There we go. And a little bit of nose up trim as well. Quick check of the T's and P's. Everything looks pretty reasonable. Don't need my taxi light anymore. 3,500 feet approaching. Still on heading. I'll come left to 2 degrees or so. So we've got an empty aeroplane today. It's just me in here. No passengers, although I can't really tip my head back properly at the minute. Track IR's just preventing me from looking behind. The Emirates over here. Right, 150 feet to go, then I'm leveling off. Okay, let's start leveling off now. So attitude first, then power, and then trim. Okay, once it's trimmed out, I'm going to turn the autopilot on, and it's going to take my heading and my altitude. Now the airplane is going to trim itself. All I got to do is just keep an eye on the throttle, that it doesn't get too fast, because the nose gets pushed down quite some way by the AP. And I just got to keep an eye on here. My RPM don't get out of control. Autopilot is now flying the airplane. So let's start reading. We are currently in the middle of chapter 4 of Johnnie Johnson's Wing Leader. The chapter is called Fighting Talk, and it is a discussion of the tactics the RAF and in part the Luftwaffe deployed during the Battle of Britain. This is a time when Johnnie Johnson himself was only flying in a very limited capacity, and he's largely talking about it, I guess, not from a perspective of first-person experience in the Battle of Britain itself, certainly not at its height in any case. And he's discussing the, let's say, the conflicts between 11 Group and 12 Group, which are pretty famous. So I'm just going to pause track IR with a relatively nice view of the cockpit here, and a little bit out to the side, out over the Gulf, and we'll start reading. So leaning into the microphone, my voice might get a bit louder. Day after day, the 12 Group wing assembled at Duxford, 4 or 5 squadrons strong, and their wing leader was forever demanding to be let off the leash against the Huns. Our radars were picking up the enemy gaggles building up over the Pas de Calais. Scramble the wing and meet the invaders well south of London. Look at the map, it was only a question of simple arithmetic. Scramble the outlying wings at Duxford, Tangmere and Middlewallop, and the Huns would be broken and scattered before they could reach London. But if they were always held back until the last moment, they couldn't intercept with a height advantage before the bombers reached London. Park, this is Keith Park, Park's main task was to decide when to react to the information presented to him by our radars and the Observer Corps. This task was not easy, for although our radars usually presented fairly accurate range and position information, they were unreliable about the number and the height of the enemy formations. To make matters worse, there was some positive evidence that the Germans were learning how to spoof our early warning network. Although a considerable number of large enemy gaggles were displayed on the radar screens, they were never actually seen in the air by our pilots. Enemy raids suddenly appear on the table in the 11 Group operations room at Uxbridge. Raid number 1 is shown as 15 plus at 6,000 feet over Cap Grenay, but experience has taught the controllers that 15 plus could be a formation of 3 or 4 times that number. Raid number 2 is 12 plus over Dunkirk, with no height, but a few minutes later it is increased to 50 plus, which probably means that the bombers have joined with their fighter escort. Raids 3, 4 and 5 are plotted over the Arras area, small numbers to begin with and no height information. Raid number 2 is now seen by the Observer Corps in the Dungeness area, but a wing of Spitfires is climbing to intercept and others are gaining height over their own airfields. Where is raid number 1, for it has disappeared from the table? Was it a decoy meant to lure up our squadrons, or a wing of Messerschmitts flying well above our radar screen? Or will it develop into a low-level attack against our forward airfields? More counters are placed on the table. Raids 6, 7 and 8 are building up over the Pas de Calais. This means that a second strong wave of fighters and bombers will follow the first attacks, and the enemy has recently shown a tendency to put in 3 distinct waves at intervals which vary between 20 minutes and 1 hour. Move the Debden wing from Maidstone, Kenley to patrol Brooklands, 222 Squadron from Hornchurch over their airfield at 15,000 feet. It's hardly enough, so reinforce them with 92 Squadron from Biggin Hill. A good reserve so far. But what's this? 3 more raids, numbers 9, 10 and 11, are plotted by the Observer Corps in the Tonbridge area. Another 100 plus over England without a vestige of radar warning, and the air battle swings in favour of the enemy. Move some of the patrolling wings and squadrons to the south to meet the attack. Replace them with North Wheeled Fighter Wing, the Hornchurch Wing, 74 Squadron and 229 Squadron. The third wave is building up over France, but some of our squadrons are already landing after the first clash. Will there be time for them to refuel and to get up again to meet the new threat? What's ready now? The Tangmere Wing, the 10 and 12 Group Wings, and a few squadrons here and there. Ask the 12 Group Wing to patrol Sheerness, and the 10 Group Wing to guard the west flank of London. And then hope the Hun doesn't put up a fourth wave over the Midlands or Southampton. He would meet with little opposition. This then was the task of the group commander, to analyse and sift the various bits of information, to fill in the gaps, to distinguish between a feint and a real threat, and to oppose it where to oppose it at the right time, height and place. Gosh, I completely lost sight of where I was reading then. Our fighter pilots were often in the right place, but at an inadequate height. And they were often highly critical of the fact that they usually suffered from a height disadvantage. It could have been said of Keith Park that he was the only man who could have lost the war in a day or even an afternoon. Too strong a commitment of his fighters might only too easily have resulted in the vast majority of his precious squadrons being caught by the enemy on the ground refueling. The majority of fighter leaders who fought the Battle of Britain contend that Park's tactics were right at the time, if for no other reason than the unreliability of our radars. The flying logbook of one of the greatest fighter pilots shows that during the Battle of Britain he flew on more than 50 scrambles in addition to many patrols. On these scrambles, which were all carried out in perfect weather, the enemy was met on about half of the occasions. This interception rate proved to be higher than that of the average squadron pilot. These records stress the profound tactical error that would have been committed had Park sent off nothing less than a Balbo on all such occasions, as advocated by the proponents of the larger formations. So Johnnie Johnson here appears to be at odds with the likes of Douglas Bader with respect to how the aircraft should have been deployed during the Battle of Britain. Interesting that, because Johnnie Johnson and Douglas were actually very, very good friends. Time is one of the most important factors in air fighting. During the Battle of Britain, the requirement in terms of time was to intercept with our fighters before the bombs fell. Far better to have one squadron above the Huns than half a dozen below. There are other reasons for not committing fighters in too large formations. The vital element of surprise was often lost because the tight formations of Hurricanes and Spitfires could be seen from a great distance by the Luftwaffe. In addition, the leaders soon found that larger the formation, the more unwieldy it is in the air and the more difficult to control. My own later experience on both offensive and defensive operations confirmed that 2 squadrons of fighters was the ideal number to lead in the air. On some subsequent operations, when large numbers of enemy fighters opposed our fighter sweeps over France, I led a Balbo of 5 squadrons. But we got in each other's way in a fight, and only the leaders were able to bring their guns to bear. Our common radio frequency was insufficient to control the activities of 60 pilots, especially in a fight. Finally, there was the weather to contend with. For when we climbed our Balbo through layers of cloud, we sometimes spent more time searching for each other than looking for the enemy. Anyone who's flown combat flight simulators knows what Johnnie Johnson's talking about here. It is interesting to note that the pattern of the great daylight air battles over Germany between the United States Army Air Forces and the Luftwaffe vindicated the tactics used by Park during the Battle of Britain. The German problem in 1944 was the same as ours 4 years previously: to stop large bomber formations escorted by fighters from reaching their targets in daylight. The Germans fell into the same trap of trying to operate their fighters in formations of up to 60 strong, the same size as one of our Balbos of 5 squadrons. These cumbersome gaggles denied to the enemy fighter pilots those essential and inherent qualities of their aircraft: speed, surprise, and maneuverability. And they fell easy prey to the ranging and aggressive American fighters. It would obviously be wrong to suggest that mass formations of fighters and bombers should not be opposed by strong concentrations of defending fighters. I have tried to describe some of the difficulties of leading and controlling the Balbos, and to make the point that a wing of 2 squadrons proved to be the ideal size for flexible operations of both offensive and defensive character. It is the task of the ground controller and not the wing leader to achieve concentration of fighters in time and space. Thus we can understand the reluctance of Keith Park to experiment with large formations during the heat and stress of battle. The passing years have undoubtedly proved his tactics of this distinguished field commander to have been correct. So that concludes Chapter 4. I will now move on with Chapter 5, which is called To the South, and we will probably only get a few pages in before it's time to start thinking about the approach into Bahrain, which I think is in the distance just left of the magnetic compass. Before we do read though, we'll just turn the track IR on and have a little bit of a look around. You can see the Emirati coastline just behind me on the left, and the very barren and plain looking desert in all directions. So we'll change the view up a little bit, just out to the right now. That looks pretty good. And we'll continue reading, but not before I've had some water. Unfortunately, it's still early in the day here. It's not even 9 o'clock in the morning yet, so I can't have a beer. Next video, maybe I'll record in the evening, and then I'll have a beer or a whiskey or something. Right, Chapter 5, To the South. It was after Christmas when I rejoined the squadron at Curtin Lindsay. This is because Johnnie Johnson had the shoulder injury, which put him out of action for about 4 or 5 months. They had spent a quiet autumn in Lincolnshire, and we did not expect to move south before the spring. During my absence, one of our flight commanders, the ex-boy apprentice Jerry Jones, intercepted a Heinkel 111 over the North Sea one bleak winter evening, just as the gathering dust joined clouds and the ocean together in the dark shades of neutral tints and made it impossible to distinguish between sea and sky. Jones shot down the enemy bomber, but a rear gunner put a bullet through his elbow as he broke away. I bet he accused the bomber pilot of sniping him. He flew the Spitfire through the darkened sky to land safely on the flare path and walked into the dispersal hut to make out his combat report before reporting to sick quarters for his medical attention. He was suspended from flying until his injured arm was fully recovered. His place at the head of A Flight had been taken by Ken Holden, and the burly Yorkshireman was now of some consequence in the squadron. 2 of the pilots, Dundas and Marples, who had been shot down and wounded whilst operating from Kenley, had also returned to the squadron. Cocky Dundas was a lanky, freckle-faced youth of 19 who, after leaving Stowe, began to serve his articles to a Yorkshire solicitor. We were to fight together for a long time and became the best of friends. Later, Cocky was best man at my wedding and godfather to my youngest son. Even at this early stage of his life, he had developed an astonishing aptitude for expensive living. Once or twice each week, he insisted on dining out of mess, when a bottle of wine with the meal, together with an assortment of drinks before and after, was the order of the day. Once, stranded at Brighton, he chartered a taxi all the way to Tangmere because he disliked buses. His hair oil came from an exclusive address in Bond Street. His uniforms were tailored in Hanover Square and lined with red silk, a custom followed by the auxiliary pilots. To show his status as a member of the Auxiliary Air Force, he should have worn 2 small brass A's, one on each lapel of his tunic, but the left A was much larger than its appropriate number. This gave him a curiously lopsided appearance and was apt to irritate some of the more serious-minded senior officers. He was a devout champion of what he called the auxiliary attitude. Cocky never became a good shot, either when poking a 12-bore at driven game or lining up the multiple guns of his Spitfire, but he was always a determined and courageous pilot, and he possessed a rare ability to lead, either in the air or on the ground. The keystones of his simple creed were honour and duty, and to enjoy life to the full at the same time. This guy Cocky Dundas sounds like an amazing chap. Cocky's brother John Dundas was one of the younger journalists of the Yorkshire Post, who, after leaving Stowe and Oxford, specialised in European affairs. He was a flight commander in another Yorkshire Auxiliary Squadron unit, 609 West Riding Squadron, but he failed to return from a fight over the Isle of Wight in late November. Spitfires had tangled with Messerschmitts when the elder Dundas jubilantly shouted over the radio, "I've finished a 109, whoopee!" His squadron commander had answered, "Good show, John," but Dundas was never seen again. Later, the German press reported that one of their foremost aces, Major Helmut Wieck, who was credited by the enemy with 56 victories, had been killed in action during this engagement, and that Wieck's wingman had in turn shot down a Spitfire. Cocky was left to carry on the Dundas tradition, which task he achieved with great distinction throughout the following 4 years. Roy Marples, a stocky, assertive boy from Manchester, although not an auxiliary member, had served with the squadron for some time. With his blonde, wavy hair and good looks, he fitted the popular conception of fighter pilot and had a fatal fascination for the opposite sex. He was to have a long and distinguished career as a pilot and leader, both at home and in the desert. A newcomer to the squadron was Pilot Officer Heppel from Newcastle. Nip, as he was generally known, belonged to a well-known flying family, for his father had fought in the Royal Flying Corps and his sister ferried various aeroplanes across the country. Nip, not yet 20, was apt to be absent-minded and something of a dreamer, but once in the air he seemed to assume an entirely different personality, for he pressed home his attacks in no uncertain fashion. Since he was the youngest and most junior member of the squadron, he was subject to somewhat more than his fair share of leg pulling, which he accepted with a considerable amount of patience and good humour. On the opposite side of the airfield, the pilots of the 1st Eagle Squadron were busy training on their Hurricanes, and we saw a great deal of those buccaneering Americans who had come across the Atlantic to join the fight. Their squadron commander was an RAF officer, as with the 2 flight commanders, but the rest were a very odd assortment, including a Hollywood set designer, a professional parachutist who had made several hundred jumps, including some at night, a Mormon from Salt Lake City, and an officer who spoke fluent Polish. They were all tremendously keen to come to grips with the Luftwaffe, and it was interesting to watch their widely different personalities combined to serve a common purpose. They were an exhilarating company to live with, and some of them could almost salute. I'm just going to bring up the map now because I'm a little unsure about exactly where I am. OBBI is, okay, dead ahead of me by about 25 miles perhaps. Yeah, it looks like I'm 2/3 of the way there. I'm going to adjust my course a couple of degrees right because it looks like we're off slightly. I'm just going to use the course selector, and the autopilot's going to bring the aeroplane to the right. In fact, I'm going to go with nearly 130 degrees. So Bahrain International, I think, is on this island over here in the distance, right on the horizon. I think that's where it is. I don't think it's over here. We'll find out soon enough. Let's continue reading. One day, Cocky Dundas and I were detailed as the readiness section, and with our Mae Wests tied securely, we lounged about the warm, comfortable dispersal hut, talking, reading flying orders or magazines, waiting for the jangling of the telephone bell that would send us streaking to our Spitfires. 2 telephones served the dispersal hut. The bell of the operations instrument had an entirely different note from the administrative line, and whenever it rang we fell silent while the operator answered. Perhaps the lad was more keyed up than we were, for almost before the bell rang, he would jump to his feet and yell into the receiver. On 2 occasions I had manoeuvred to the door to get a flying start, but these were false alarms. Some operations clerk wanted to know the number of pilots and the serviceability state of our Spitfires. Gosh, that's a bit of a tongue twister. So we settled down to our reading and tried not to hear the disturbing clamour of the bell. It jangled again. This time the airman dropped the instrument like a hot potato and bellowed, "Scramble red section," so loud that the Eagle squadron on the other side of the field probably heard him. I settled down after the wild scramble into the cockpit, after the hurried start, and after the lurching, bouncing takeoff, which was not helped by the stiff crosswind. Now there was time to collect myself, to draw up alongside Cocky, and to listen to the calm, impersonal voice of the controller. He sent us climbing over the white, snow-sheeted fields and well out over the North Sea, and always climbing into the cloudless sky. We were after a lone radar, probably a twin-engine bomber, and far below I caught a glimpse of a straggling convoy of 20 ships heading south, the target of the bomber. It was the perfect interception. We were up sun and higher than the Dornier 17. But he saw us when we streaked down and wheeled around for Holland in a fast diving turn. Cocky went in first, and I followed as he broke away. I thought that I was well within range, but I opened fire too far out, always the fault of a beginner. The enemy gunner fired long bursts from his cabin position behind the pilot, and the tracer left his barrel in a seemingly slow orange clusters, but suddenly they separated and streaked over the top of the Spitfire. I broke away when I was at a good killing range of 200 yards, and I swung the Spitfire around for another attack. I bored in closer before opening fire, for the undercarriage of the Dornier was hanging down. Wisps of whitish smoke came from the port engine, and there was no return fire from the gunner. This time I went in much closer, and the Spitfire was violently rocked in the bomber's slipstream when I broke hard to starboard. We reefed our Spitfires around in a greying out turn to finish off our badly damaged opponent, but a layer of sea fret persisted up to about 1,000 feet, and the crippled Dornier slipped into this concealing mist. Although we strained our eyes and flew low over the smooth surface of the sea, we didn't catch another glimpse of the bomber. We flew back to Curtin, where we made out our combat reports and handed them to Gibbs. Already our listening service had intercepted a distress signal from the Dornier to its base in Holland, and it seemed doubtful if it could struggle back to the Dutch coast. But we had not seen the aircraft plunge into the sea, neither had we observed any signs of fire, so the bomber could not be claimed as probably destroyed. So I was officially credited with one Dornier 17 damaged. And this little incident marked the beginning of my personal score against the Luftwaffe. Right, I just had a message pop up on screen, which I'm just going to quickly see if I can read back before it disappears. And I have to head 120, Victor for visual runway 121 down to 4,000. Okay, good. So I'm going to put the book away and track IR. So we're going to descend to 4,000, which we're pretty much at. Victor 120, which we need to come left onto. Alrighty. Quick little look at the map here. You can see, yeah, we're pretty much on a good path in now to Bahrain International. There is a Beechcraft over here at 11,000 feet, so well above me. It'll be up there somewhere. It's a little bit tricky to continue reading when I start getting radio messages. Oh, I'm out of trim. Considerably out of trim. I wonder how long I've been flying uncoordinated for. Oh well. Fixed now. We'll gain some airspeed too, probably as a result. Okay, my track is 118, so I'm going to come 2 degrees right. I wouldn't mind descending by about 20 feet, but I run the risk of over descending and then we oscillate about 4,000 feet, so I don't really want to do that. Quick fuel check shows me that I've got about 12 gallons in each tank, and we started with 15, so there's absolutely tons of fuel left. Better do some TMP checks here, which we probably should have been doing at regular intervals along the way and not reading, but too bad. No need for the pitot heat up here, especially not at this relatively low altitude, and we're over the Gulf, so it's going to be hot. You can see it's 20 degrees, 26 degrees outside air temperature currently. So Bahrain is now visual. Just to the right of the aircraft, below the horizon, that's the peninsula. And quite a few aircraft around, mostly 20s. See if there's anyone down at my altitude now. Everyone's up at 10 to 20,000 feet, all these other aeroplanes. I am going to have to cross the Gulf at some point in a future flight, and then we'll fly along the south coast of Iran, I think, over to Pakistan and then across India. If I can get a few of these flights done over the next couple of months, then hopefully we'll be in about India when Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 is released, and then we'll continue maybe the southern hemisphere section of the flying in MSFS 2020, but in all likelihood it's going to be before then, based on how regularly, or rather how irregularly, I actually do these flights. That said, I should have some time on my hands over the next couple of months to get a few more done and get some more videos made. I wonder whether I should take the risk and read some more. I think I'm going to. No? Yes. Okay, so that's Baron somebody. He's getting airborne, I think, so I should be okay to read. I've got to try and sort of half keep an eye on the screen, though. So that view will do. Let's continue reading. Late one February evening, Billy Burton walked into the dispersal hut with welcome news. We were to fly south in a few days, and if all went well, we would remain in 11 group for the spring and the summer. We gathered around and plied him with questions. Where was our new home? Biggin, Kenley, North Weald, Hornchurch, or Northolt? But he shook his head at all these guesses. Then someone said Tangmere, and the CO laughed and nodded, and a ripple of excitement ran through our small company. We all knew Tangmere, a pleasant sunny airfield which crouched at the foot of the South Downs and was only separated from the coast by a small, flat span of Sussex land. It was one of Fighter Command's established airfields and for many years had provided a home for fighter squadrons. In our world, Tangmere was already a tradition, for its squadrons had gained great distinction during the fighting of the previous autumn when they had routed many an enemy raid. Now we would strive to add to that tradition and at the same time again a reputation for our squadron. These were our thoughts on that bleak February evening in Lincolnshire, but they were unspoken. I'll take the squadron down to Tangmere next Wednesday, said the CO. We're relieving 65 Squadron, who will bring our Spit 1s back here. We will take over their Spit 2s at Tangmere. We'll have better aircraft and will be right in the front line. If the Huns come across again like last year, we'll have all our work cut out. If not, the form is that we'll carry out offensive to France, so there'll be plenty of excitement. The South Yorkshire Squadron was popular both with the members of the Eagle Squadron and with the permanent staff at Curtin Lindsay, and everybody wanted to have a suitable opportunity of wishing us bon voyage for our return to 11 Group and the fighting. The popular station commander Stephen Hardy was also leaving to take up a staff appointment at the Air Ministry, so the mess committee held a party to mark both events. Okay, we've got to descend to 2000 and we've got to turn on to 210. I'm just going to read that back. We're going to have a bit of a busy time now.
210. Descend and maintain 2000. Skyhawk 2 Sierra Papa.
Okay. So, autopilot off. Descend to 2000. Trimming. Turn on to 210. Just gotta watch the airspeed here. Okay, there's my heading. 210. Descending now, pretty rapidly. Okay, let's see if the aircraft holds this trim. Looks like it is going to. That's 3,000 feet. Seems like we're getting a bit fast all of a sudden. I need to just adjust my seating position here a little bit. It's a bit uncomfortable. 2,400. So a bit of power on. Bringing the attitude back gently just so we level off nice and slowly. Okay, bringing the nose gently back into the level position. Still a fraction high. Okay, that'll do there. Alright, setting the aeroplane back onto the autopilot to hold this 210 heading. Oh, it's 199. I need to come right 10 degrees. Airspeed's a bit low. I'm just going to give the throttle a bit of a pump forward here. Okay, fly heading 120, report the field in sight. Read back. Fly 150. 12 left. Okay, that's 150. I gotta report the field in sight. So I'm looking for it. There's a whole lot of buildings up here. Ah, there's my airfield over there. Okay, I've got sight of the field. 120, yeah, okay. Right, check my lights are on. I'm going to turn the landing light on shortly. Just going to readjust my camera position. Lining up on the field. Descender main 2000. Oh, God, I always do that. These icons are right close together. Okay, nose down, please. Time to turn the landing light on, I think. Come on, nose down. Fly heading 120, report the field in sight. Okay, I'm going to report the field in sight now because I do actually have it. Okay, there's me reporting the field in sight. Now they're going to change me over to the field controller. Contact tower 1185. Clear visual 121. Oh, 12. 12 left. Good. Okay. So I'm cleared on visual 12 left, which is this one here. Changing now to 1185 radio frequency, which is the tower. Now I'm checking with the controller. Right, peppy lights, I think all white. So landing light on. Might as well turn the strobe on, just add extra flashings. So the near peppy lights are white, indicating them a bit too high, but the far peppy lights are red and white, indicating they're on glide slope for about mid-runway. I'm just going to maintain this. I don't really need the peppy lights, actually. I can just fly this in visually. It's pretty obvious what's going on. Start bringing the throttle back. Good. I'm clear to land. So I'm really fast at the minute. Whoa, wow. Is that a sudden bump in engine RPM? I don't know what that was all about. Really strange. I didn't touch the controls. That seemed like maybe there's a bad key binding or something. We can put the flaps down now. Nose is just a ballooning a fraction. Got an aircraft on the right there. Just flying over my 2 o'clock position, twin engine. Okay, forward speed's pretty good here. A little bit of a crosswind. I shouldn't be able to hear that aeroplane over the engine of this one, but oh well. It's quite far away too. Oh yeah, bit of a crosswind to deal with here. Very slight though. There's actually a car driving across the runway up there, would you believe? Okay, so what is this? Taxi, gate 3, taxi via 12 East 30L. That's a tough one. Lima Echo. Okay. Okay, I'm going to taxi via 12 left, which I'm on now. Echo 30L. Okay, it's 12L or something there. I do have the little taxi wizard showing on the ground, but I'd still like to read off actually which one it is. Apparently it's this one here. The sign indicating which taxiway it is after the taxiway. So you can't see it until you've gone past the taxiway, which is a little bit annoying. Here's 30L here. And if you didn't have an airfield chart on you, really easily accessible, you'd be a bit stuffed, to be honest.
Runway 30 left, Skyhawk 2 Sierra.
Okay, so this is 30 left. That's why that other guy was getting airborne, because I've actually got 2 runways here. This is the 30 left, and the one I landed on was 12 left. So now I'm actually taxiing down an active runway, potentially.
Tower, SJX Vision 1, Charlie. SJX Vision 1, Charlie, Victor, cross runway 30 left, runway 1.
Yeah, it really pays, I think, to have an airfield chart for places like this. Okay, so I'm exiting 30 left now. And we want to go gate 3, apparently.
Skyhawk 2 Sierra Papa, contact ground on 121.85.
Contact ground on 12185.
121.85.
So what have we got here? Cathay Pacific, Delta Airlines. We've got Air New Zealand as well. American Airlines. Let's check in with ground.
Skyhawk 2 Sierra Papa.
Oh yeah. Disable the radio. Pop-up box. This looks like my stand here next to the American Airlines beast. Little Cessna coming in here to the to this gate. Oh goodness. Okay, bring that sky corridor over here, guys. I'd like to get out of my airplane and straight into that, please. Where's all the ground crew here to meet me? Where's all the baggage carts? Come on, guys, sort yourselves out. I'm just being left to my own devices here. This isn't very fair. Oh, here we go. Here's a truck. Yes, please. Keep coming. Keep coming. That's it. Just park right there, thank you. No, park. Please stop. Please stop. Oh, this is looking very bad. I'm about to be run over by an airfield truck. We've now merged. I'm now sitting inside that truck. And off he goes. Yeah. I don't need to say much more about that. Right, let's turn some lights and shit off. Fouling my spark plugs there with my low RPM. Turn the brake on. No, seriously. Jeez. And we're going to shut the radios off first. Flaps to the up position. All my lights are now off. Gonna lean the mixture, will kill the engine. Magneto's off. And battery. Everything is now off. I'm free to get out of the aeroplane. We'll go to the external view. So there we are. We're at, but oh, there's another vehicle. This time it's a limo, and he's also decided to drive straight through my aeroplane. So well done, Xplane, for having really crap AI on your airfields. We are finished here. That's the end of the flight. Someone else is getting airborne. Welcome to Bahrain. Happy days. Quick look at my landing then, just as we come into touchdown. This was quite a long fly down. Oh, relatively level attitude. I just about got airborne again then for a second. And then plumps onto those wheels and wriggling about with the rudders. Yeah, I'll take that.